Well, hello, everybody. I'm super excited to be back on the Fitness and Nutrition Simplified podcast. I know it took a little bit of a hiatus for a couple months, but we're back, and I couldn't be more excited to have one of my good friends, and he's a badass dietitian, Isaac Polhman. He's a master's in public health. He's a registered dietitian. He's worked with over 400 people with diabetes. He's my go-to. He's my guy when it comes to diabetes. I have any questions regarding clients or just some chats learning about diabetes, but he is phenomenal at what he does. He's actually writing a book. I can't wait for that to come out. I got to see the preview, and let me tell you, if you're someone listening to this podcast, and you just need some just awesome information about diabetes, you got to get the book. I've enjoyed it. Enjoyed looking through it so far. And yeah, it's a phenomenal resource. Uh, but yeah, but enough of that. We're gonna roll right into my first question I want to ask you, Isaac. It's just a little bit about your story, in your quest here and to becoming a good dietitian and working with people with diabetes.
Yeah, yeah. And first and foremost, Nate, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here and that great intro. But yeah, I think what brought me here is a little bit of a personal journey. I grew up in a very rural community in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and during that setting, it's you don't have much to do but play outside, do sports and exercise, and that was like a big thing for me growing up. And so I was very much into sports and doing the best that I could in there. And as I got more into it and going into high school, I started to look into getting any edge that I could, and nutrition was one of those things that really stood out to me. And I saw all of my favorite professional athletes just using nutrition to support their performance. So I thought, hey, why don't I do that? And so that's what really got me into it, because at that time I was being looked at for college soccer teams, and I was really interested in playing. And at that point too, I think I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to get to that point, but also get good grades in high school. And with the combination, there was a lot of overtraining at that time and not as much recovery. And so it was kind of a learning process for me that recovery is certainly an important piece. And unfortunately, that did lead to me experiencing a lot of burnout with exercise, to the point where I actually developed something known as gastroparesis, which, if the listeners aren't familiar, it's like delayed stomach emptying, meaning that you could feel very full after just a few bites of food. And during that time, I was already underweight. I was like 100 pounds, 5'5" in high school, and needed to gain weight, but I ended up losing another like 15 pounds, and I was like 85 pounds, skin and bones. And so I ended up having to quit all the sports that I was doing in high school and recover from that. And so it really hit home the importance of nutrition and recovery again, and how that is so important. And that brought me to college, where kind of my health issues got even worse. And because I was taking basically pre-med classes while playing college soccer, the combination and being away from home in a new setting, that was really difficult for me. And so the combination, I ended up being chronically fatigued and getting all sorts of food allergies and intolerances and all these weird symptoms that just started to develop, to the point where I couldn't continue sports anymore. And so this was like my third learning lesson along the way, that, hey, we need to really dive into this. Like, what are these root contributors that are making me feel this way? And I had a lot of well-meaning doctors around me at the time, but none of which were really getting at what I probably needed at that point. And that's where my professional nutrition journey began, because I started looking into it more, started seeing results with how I felt, my energy, my testosterone, my metabolism, and even skin health as well, because I had a lot of cystic acne at that time too. And so I started to see results, and that really pushed me to learning more nutrition in a professional manner. So I went on to the University of Michigan, where I studied nutrition in graduate school. And at that time, I actually got to learn my fourth nutrition lesson because I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes during that time. And to kind of transition to what you talked about, that's where I started learning more about how to support myself from a nutrition perspective while developing diabetes. And so that's what really motivated me to get into nutrition and look into diabetes specifically. It was all kind of a personal journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. I think it's so funny, when you think about it too, that like all of dietitians that I've been so blessed to be associated with. We always have these stories, right? Like we always have our personal journeys of things we struggled with, and it's really, I think, led us to be very amazing dietitians. And it's really powerful, to hear, about how you got diabetes, and then now what you're doing with clients and just all the success I've seen. But to tell the listeners to hear from you, not from me, it's who do you help when it comes to, I know you said type 1 diabetes, but why? Why did you choose to help this population?
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever I can relate to somebody that I'm working with, I think it makes it so much easier to help them because I can understand maybe not exactly what they're going through, but a very similar circumstance that I have been through and how I kind of navigate it gives me kind of I feel like an edge or kind of a picture in their mind of, hey, this is kind of what they're experiencing both physically, emotionally through this process, and this is kind of what helped me or my other clients, and so just that relationship with those people. And I think with diabetes, it's a very isolating condition. There's not a lot of people that have type 1, or there's a large majority that do have type 2, but many of their family members don't. And so it's something that can be very isolating, and I felt like there was a population that wasn't quite getting the support that it probably needed. And with chronic conditions, whether that is diabetes or anything else that someone is managing on a regular basis, I think at times the medical system can drop the ball with supporting them to the best of their ability, particularly for folks that maybe are wanting to look at things beyond just taking medications, right? I don't think we necessarily have a great support with that. And just with my knowledge and background and my interests, I felt like, hey, I see a need here. I see people that are needing support, and I feel like I have the background to support them. Why not pursue that? And I think the word for me, Nate, is it's fulfilling. It's fulfilling to fill that need because there are so many people looking for that and aren't quite getting the support that they're after. And I want to continue providing that because it's such a population that I think doesn't receive enough attention and care.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. Like, yeah, I love what you said there. The reasoning of, why you're helping these people. And, I see it day to day, not only, with the clients I've chatted with, but even, when I work with clients in person, with my business and stuff like that, is that like, yeah, you hear it everywhere. Like, I have type 1 diabetes, and people feel like it's so debilitating. And just kind of listening to, how you've been able to really navigate through clients and show them it's not debilitating, and how you're able to live with it, and do so many great things. But I think a lot of people, when they go to the doctor, at least this is what I heard. I'd love to hear, because you've chatted with a lot more diabetes clients than I have, but they go to the doctor and they say, and their doctor gives them this cookie cutter advice. And I don't know about you, but I cringe, and you probably cringe more than me, because you understand this disease at a higher level than I do. And they like, don't eat potatoes, and carbs are gonna kill you, or whatever, and
Yeah.
just get your A1C down. And I always feel like the people I've chatted with over the years, my grandpa's one of them. They feel like they feel very defeated, because they feel like there's nothing they can do, and they feel like they've got to go home, and they got to make these crazy changes to see the results of that lowering down of the A1C. But I'd love to hear kind of from you, what's your experience, and what are some things that you've heard, and maybe what's one little tidbit of something you've done to help somebody overcome that, and really show them that at the end of the day, that like they can live a good, fulfilling life with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a great question because going back to what I mentioned with like the chronic conditions, I think sometimes I don't want to say sometimes, I think a lot of times we do make it very overwhelming for a person. And just to give you an example of that, Nate, after my internship, I did work clinically for about like maybe 4 or 5 months. And in particular, giving diabetes educations to those that were either diagnosed or needed a refresher on things. And so what was standard practice was to give them this huge packet of information and try to teach them to this within one day and, kick them out then the next. And maybe they did have a follow-up with some diabetes educator, or maybe they didn't. Maybe that was the only touch point that they had. And since the process was like so overwhelming and they have so many sheets of information and handouts to go over, it was like, God, can I even do this? Like, and that's where you mentioned the feeling of feeling defeated comes into play, because people feel like, oh, I got to master all of what's listed in this handout, or maybe they're getting a message from their doctor that says, hey, I got to go keto. I have to do a extreme low carb diet because this is what's going to get my A1C down. Not understanding that, hey, is this actually going to be sustainable? That's the biggest question. We could have the best plan in the whole world, but if we're not able to implement that, does it really matter? And that's the most important piece. And the other piece too is that we have made diabetes so much about blood sugars and A1C, and I won't argue the importance of that for longevity and avoiding complications, but at the same time, like, we have to be able to support a person's health as well. And sometimes we view blood sugars as being synonymous with good health, and it certainly can be, but so can the opposite be true. I've seen people that have been on very extreme diets and have really good blood sugars, but are feeling just terrible. And so we have to come up with an approach that helps to support both their blood sugars and how they feel. And going back to your question around the tidbit, that's where my practice is really aligned with, is finding these approaches that can support the person, be it a sustainable process, and support their blood sugars. And we get both of those three, that's where I feel people really thrive. And the more that we view that from that lens, I think, the easier this is going to be for many people. And within the social media age, I think we have so much information, and at these diabetes appointments, so much information. But if we can distill it down into just a step-by-step process where we're not drinking from a fire hose, but are dripping it to these individuals in a way that supports them and where they're at, that's where I see most of the success taking place.
I love that. I love, what you highlighted there too, is that, you're not going to be, drinking from a fire hose. And I even remember I did a couple diabetes education and, being a very new intern, not really knowing everything. But yeah, I remember thinking like, I mean, literally, there's no chance in hell that these people are going to get this packet. And I think it was like this thick. I don't remember, but I was just like, I'm going to give this to them. I'm going to highlight a couple things. I'm going to chat with them. And I just always felt like when they left, they just had, I'm like, they're not doing this. And then to really listen to kind of like what you're saying of diabetes and just making it very simple. And it's so cool because, what he does is it's kind of like what I do with weight loss clients. He makes it super simple and it's very, very effective. And it's sustainability. I love that pillar that you really build your program and practice out of, is the sustainability aspect, because I love what you said. Like, it doesn't matter, what you do, but if you can't sustain it, and you're not in good health, really, what's the point? I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of how I feel. And I really love, just kind of how you work with clients and you just make it so simple and so easy and sustainable, and they don't feel like when they get done with you, that they feel overwhelmed. And that's really, really cool about what you do. What would be another, like, if you give one more tip or like one more like suggestion to anybody that's just maybe newly diagnosed, or they've been diagnosed with diabetes for a while, that could really help them on their journey? What would that one thing be?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's a really great question because it distills it down because we can go in multiple different directions with diabetes, and frankly, there are over 42 factors that go into impacting blood sugar, and so it's easy to go in all these different directions. But what I have many clients do to kind of simplify this is just simply take an inventory, and that can help them take it one step at a time. And what I say or what I mean but when I say inventory, what I mean is looking at kind of your life in general and looking at what I call basically the big four, stress, nutrition, sleep, and movement. So when we look at those individual pieces, where are those at? If we had to rank those on a score of like 1 to 5, where 1 is the lowest or worst and 5 is the best, where would each of those fall? And that can give us a great idea of where we could go. Where is the low hanging fruit where we can support you a little bit more so that you can feel better, so that you can have these better blood sugars. But because what do we know about stress? Well, we know stress raises blood sugar, it raises A1C. What do we know about movement? Same thing. It makes us more insulin resistant, meaning our blood sugars tend to run a little bit higher, right? What do we know about nutrition? Well, imbalanced nutrition can lead to a lot of imbalanced blood sugars, right? So, and same thing with sleep. If we're not getting the quality or the quantity of sleep that we need, our blood sugars tend to rise in the morning, which many people with diabetes, it's the most difficult reading to get into range is that fasting reading. And sleep can be a big part of that. And so it's recognizing, hey, which one of these needs the most support and identifying that. And then looking at, hey, what is one strategy that I can implement today, not 10, not 100, not 1,000, but one strategy that I can start working on to see some progress with this. And so let's just take for an example, if it's nutrition, that is the biggest thing. Many people that I see that are working with higher blood sugars in the morning, they tend to be eating a lot of their food towards the end of the day, bulk of their calories. And what ends up happening is typically if they fall into that pattern, their blood sugars the next day are going to be a lot higher. So one thing that these individuals can start doing is start eating a little bit earlier, start eating breakfast within about 30 to 60 minutes upon waking. And by doing that, it kind of flips the script. It gets them to consume more of their food earlier on in the day. They're meeting their body's needs, their energy needs. And as a result, they're not going to feel as hungry at night. And as a result, their blood sugars are more balanced, more steady in the morning time. And so that's just one example of that. But again, I would go back to that inventory, looking at those 4 individual pieces and asking yourself, which is maybe the worst out of those 4? And then what is one step I can do to start tackling that?
I love that. That's so cool. No, you're right. Just really distilling it down and focusing on one thing. I use the saying, baby steps to success, right? Don't
Yep.
feel like you've got to do kind of like what you said. There's all these 42 different factors, if I wrote it down correctly, that play into diabetes. And don't try to do all 42, and just take it one step at a time. I love that. It's so awesome. But Isaac, let me ask you this. If anybody is, wanting to learn more about you, what you do and everything, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I do have my Instagram and Facebook channels where I put out a lot of my content. My handle is just my name, Isaac Polhman, ISAAC POHLMAN. So you can look me up there if you want access to my content that I put out on a weekly basis around type 1, type 2, diabetes, pre-diabetes. So certainly go over there if you're on those channels. I also do have a more in-depth support for free as well. It's my Facebook group. And so I think, Nate, you can probably tag the link there in the comments. But that is another place where you can get some more support. And I go live twice weekly with Q&As and trainings in there and put in more additional free content as well. So that's another place. And then I do have my website. Again, it's my name, isaacpolhman.com, where you can download actually a free report on beginning to lower insulin resistance, which can be a common contributor, or the main contributor, I would say, to type 1 or type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, and then can make type 1 a little bit more difficult to manage too. So it has a very common link, and you can download that from my website. And then if you're looking for more one-on-one support, there is a work with me tab on the top, and you can look at kind of the program that I offer, as well as scheduling a time for us to chat if you are looking to work on some goals. And then in this coming year, Nate, just the last point is I'm coming out with a book, as you said. It's specifically for folks with type 1 diabetes who are looking to not only have better blood sugars, but have better health, both mental and physical, as they manage this moving forward without having to cut out carbohydrates.
I love that. You know, all this. Don't worry if you're listening, you're listening to the car, or you're listening to this episode. I'm gonna put all of this stuff in the show notes, so you're gonna be able to access it, links and everything. So it's super simple for you guys to work with. And I'm telling you, you know what? We've been good friends for a couple years now. Really got a chance to pick his brain, you know, professionally and personally. I'm telling you what, if you're somebody with diabetes type 1 and you just need someone to help you take your diabetes to the next level in terms of managing it and just giving yourself a solution that you can do for the rest of your life when you're done working with him, I'm telling you what, you got to hit this guy up. If nothing else, have a call with him, and chat with him and see how he can help you. He's helped over 400 people. And I'd be so excited to know if one of our listeners had the opportunity to work with him. He's doing some great stuff in the diabetes space. I really think he's a pioneer, in my personal opinion. He's a pioneer in this space of type 1 diabetes, in terms of giving people a system and a skill set they can use for the rest of their life. So when they go to the doctor, they don't get that age old cut out carbohydrates. You can't have potatoes. Carbs are the devil. You can't eat them and lower your A1C by an obnoxious amount in a short amount of time. After you work with him, your doctor's he's not going to say anything to you about that. And you're going to be given something that you can do for life. And with that being said, Isaac, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a chat with me and just share more to the masses of what type 1 diabetes is, and give them some information and how they can work with you if they need to be. And with that being said, all my listeners, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for every single Fridays. I'm going to be putting out episodes of the Nutrition and Simplified podcast, and everybody take care.